What if the city that fed emperors for 600 years built its food identity on dishes it did not invent and traditions inherited from conquerors? Today on Recipe Lab, we are breaking down 10 iconic dishes the world associates with Beijing and revealing that almost none of them started there. In the 10th place, Peking duck arrives in Beijing not as a local invention, but as a diplomatic import from Nanjing. When the Ming dynasty shifted its capital north in 1420, the emperor's kitchens demanded their signature roast duck, so a relay of duck caravans began, hauling thousands of birds up the Grand Canal in specially lined wagons. The birds were fattened in Nanjing, then roasted over orchard fruit wood fires once they reached the new capital, giving the dish its signature aroma. Centuries later, this same lacquered duck would become a global emblem of Chinese hospitality, famously served at the state banquet when Nixon met Mao in 1972, a moment broadcast worldwide, yet rooted in the logistics of imperial relocation. Peking duck's journey reveals how Beijing's most iconic dish is, at its core, a product of state power, long-distance supply chains, and the politics of culinary branding. Number 9. Mongolian hot pot traces its roots not to Beijing's hutongs, but to the wind-swept camps of the Mongol army. In the 13th century, Mongol horsemen gathered around portable cauldrons, slicing mutton paper thin to cook quickly in boiling broth, a practical solution for armies on the move. Yuan dynasty provisioning records detail how these communal meals fueled conquest, with copper pots designed for efficiency and warmth on the open steppe. Over time, this battlefield necessity became a winter ritual in Beijing, its iconic central chimney pot, a direct descendant of Mongol ingenuity. The palace kitchens adopted the dish, transforming military logistics into urban tradition, proof that even Beijing's most beloved comfort foods are forged in the crucible of conquest. In 8th place, Beijing noodles with fermented bean sauce owe their flavor not to grand chefs, but to the quiet labor of families preserving tradition on their rooftops. In the narrow hutongs, jars of soybean paste, each sealed with a unique family stamp, fermented beneath the sun, their contents destined for bowls of hand-pulled noodles. Oral histories from 1978 capture elders recalling the daily ritual of tending these jars, a practice shaped as much by scarcity as by taste. During the Cultural Revolution, rationing forced households to stretch every ingredient, making home fermentation a lifeline. Yet as factories standardized the process, the subtle differences between households faded, replaced by a single industrial flavor. What survives in memory is not just a dish, but a record of survival. Proof that Beijing's everyday foodways were built on rooftops and resilience, not imperial decree. Number 7. Beijing roast lamb brings the Silk Road's winding path straight into the heart of the capital. The scent of cumin, so central to this dish, first drifted in with Hui Muslim merchants, whose caravans hauled spice sacks from Kashgar to Beijing centuries before the city's cuisine was codified. Archival ledgers from the Kashgar-Beijing route list cumin by the crate, destined for Niuji's markets, where Hui butchers perfected the art of slow roasting lamb over open flames. This was not palace fare, but a specialty born in the city's Muslim quarter, sustained by generations of minority families who weathered political storms and changing regimes. Interviews with elders at the Niujie Mosque recall roast lamb as both a festive centerpiece and a quiet act of cultural survival. Today, century-old vendors trace their lineage back to guilds that once negotiated safe passage for their spice-laden caravans. In a city so often defined by imperial decree, Beijing roast lamb stands as a living record of commerce, adaptation, and the enduring imprint of Hui Muslim ingenuity. Number 6. Imperial court pastries Moon-shaped cakes known as Jingbao represent a rare case where Beijing's kitchens did create something all their own, only to nearly lose it in the aftermath of revolution. The original recipe appears in Qing Dynasty apprenticeship rolls from 1688, listing a master baker tasked with crafting gold leaf mooncakes for the emperor's mid-autumn feast. For centuries, these pastries passed from master to apprentice in tightly guarded chains, their secrets kept within the palace walls. In 1949, political campaigns targeted symbols of feudal privilege, forcing surviving bakers underground. Some risked arrest to teach the next generation in secret, preserving the lineage through coded recipe scrolls and whispered instructions. Today, a handful of living apprentices still carry the original certificate, a fragile thread connecting Beijing's present to its imperial past. In a city famous for adopting the foods of outsiders, imperial pastries stand as a testament to the endurance and vulnerability of local invention. Number 5. Fermented mung bean juice, known in Beijing as duji, stands out as the city's most divisive breakfast ritual. Born from scarcity, this cloudy, tart liquid is the byproduct of mung bean starch extraction, a waste stream transformed by hutong families into a cheap, protein-rich staple. Early 20th century workshop ledgers and state rationing edicts reveal how, during lean years, every drop was collected, fermented, and sold at dawn from battered tin pails. For generations of Beijing's working poor, duji was more than a drink. It was survival in a bowl, delivering essential calories when meat and eggs were out of reach. The taste, often described as sour gym socks or urban vinegar, draws a sharp line between locals and outsiders. Oral histories echo with stories of rooftop jars tended by grandmothers, of children pinching their noses, and of the drink's status as a litmus test of authentic belonging. Even today, heritage stalls serve doji to an audience split between nostalgia and revulsion. In a city famed for imperial banquets, it is this humble, recycled broth that most honestly captures Beijing's history of endurance and adaptation. Number 4. Beijing Offal Stew is the city's most enduring flavor archive, yet its origins owe more to survival than to culinary invention. In the cramped alleys, vendors built their reputations on broths that never fully cooled, simmering day and night as discarded organs from elite kitchens found new purpose in battered cauldrons. Stall permits from the early Republic era list dozens of these soup cellars, each claiming a secret stock that grew richer with every batch. Ethnographers document how bread vendors and stew stalls forged a symbiotic trade, pairing sesame flatbreads with bowls of steaming, peppery liquid that carried the memory of 100 meals. For generations of Beijing's working poor, this stew was both sustenance and resistance, a way to reclaim what the wealthy left behind, transforming waste into nourishment. In a city where imperial banquets stole the spotlight, it was these continuous broths, passed from one shift to the next, that quietly shaped the capital's deepest culinary heritage. Number 3. Beijing yogurt captures a story of nomadic know-how reshaped by the city's appetite for both novelty and practicality. Long before glass bottles and plastic cups, Mongol herders fermented milk in animal skins on the open steppe, a tradition recorded in Yuan court annals as early as the 13th century, when dairy products like arag and kumis were prized at imperial banquets. But it was the Qing era that turned this steppe staple into a citywide phenomenon. Street vendors began selling tangy, sweetened yogurt in small, thick-walled ceramic jars, each carrying a deposit. Customers would return the empty pots, creating a circular economy centuries before the term existed. Qing-era street records describe the clatter of these jars as a fixture of Beijing's morning markets, with shops competing on the smoothness of their culture and the efficiency of their return system. Today, the sight of blue and white pots stacked outside corner stores points to an unbroken chain of reuse, an environmental legacy embedded in the city's daily rhythm. Beijing yogurt stands as proof that the capital's most iconic snacks often arrived by caravan, not by kitchen, and that sustainability is sometimes the oldest tradition of all. Number 2, Beijing street crepe, Jianbing, stands as the city's breakfast badge, yet its roots lie far to the east, in Shandong's wheat fields. In the late Qing and early Republican eras, waves of Shandong migrants poured into Beijing, bringing with them the humble Kong Jian, a scallion pancake folded for portability. Archival vendor registers from 1765 list dozens of crepe sellers with Jinan surnames, each tweaking the batter to suit local tastes. But it was in Beijing's streets that the Jianbing became an edible canvas. Vendors cracked fresh eggs onto the sizzling griddle, layered on a shatteringly crisp cracker, and brushed the surface with sweet bean sauce and pickled mustard greens. These flourishes were not tradition. They were pure invention, born from competition and the city's appetite for novelty. Licensing records from the 19th century show how migrant families staked their livelihoods on these stalls, transforming a regional snack into a citywide ritual. By the dawn rush hour, the Jianbing became more than just food. It was proof of vendor ingenuity, a daily performance of adaptation that turned outsider fare into Beijing's most democratic cuisine. In a city shaped by conquest and class struggle, the street crepe is a reminder that culinary icons are often the work of migrants whose names, recorded in faded permits, still echo beneath the morning clatter. And finally, in first place, fried sauce noodles, or zhajiangmian, stand as the ultimate culinary cipher for Beijing's identity crisis. No dish is more insistently marketed as the capital's own, yet its very DNA is stitched together from every current of migration, conquest, and municipal branding that shaped the city's table. Yuan dynasty market records from the 1350s already mention rooftop jars of zhajiang paste, their seals marked not with imperial crests, but with the personal stamps of Hutong families and traveling scholars. By the early 1900s, shop ledgers show a surge in noodle stalls, each advertising a different ratio of bean to wheat, pork to soybean, as ingredient flows from Shandong, Hebei, and beyond converged in the capital's alleys. It was only in the 20th century, under the pressures of municipal modernization and mass media, that zhajiangmian was standardized. Its sauce ratios were fixed, its image plastered across city posters, its story rewritten as the taste of Beijing itself. Behind the bowl, late Yuan supply chains ferried soybeans from the south, while post-war branding campaigns in the 1950s and the 1980s turned a patchwork staple into a badge of belonging. Today, the dish's everyday ubiquity, on school lunch trays, in banquet halls, at midnight street carts, masks its origins as a product of adaptation, negotiation, and relentless reinvention. Zhajiangmian is not a relic of ancient Beijing, but the edible proof that what we call local is often just the sum of everything the city has absorbed, standardized, and sold back to itself. In the end, the most Beijing dish of all is the one that reveals the city's genius for turning outside influences into everyday ritual. Which of these dishes shattered your assumptions about Beijing's food history? Let us know in the comments below. Across all 10 dishes, one truth cuts through. Beijing's cuisine is less a local invention than a political crossroads, where conquest, migration, and class struggle left edible evidence. Every bite is history rewritten, power negotiated, outsiders welcomed or erased. Which Beijing dish challenged your assumptions the most? Let us know below.